Have you ever heard a story so strange, so chilling, that it blurs the line between life and death? Today, we're traveling to the small Irish town of Lurgan, to a quiet graveyard where one tombstone tells a tale that defies belief. It simply reads, "Lived once, buried twice." This is the incredible, true story of Margorie McCall. Our story begins in the year 1705. Life was fragile, and medicine was a far cry from what we know today. In Lurgan, Margorie McCall, the wife of a local doctor named John, was struck down by a sudden, vicious fever. Despite her husband's desperate attempts to save her, Margorie's breathing grew faint, her pulse faded, and she was pronounced dead. In those days, a coma could easily be mistaken for death. Fearing the illness might be contagious, the townspeople insisted on a swift burial. And so, with heavy hearts, her family laid her to rest in Shankill graveyard, still wearing her precious golden wedding ring. Her husband, John, couldn't bear to remove it, as her fingers were too swollen from the fever. That ring, however, would become the key to her astonishing return. That very night, under the cover of darkness, two shadowy figures crept into the graveyard. They were grave robbers, a grim profession in the 18th century. Their plan was simple: dig up the fresh grave, steal any valuables, and perhaps even sell the body to a medical school. The scraping of their shovels against the damper was the only sound breaking the silence. Soon, they hit the coffin. With a creak of wood, they pried it open. There lay Margorie, looking as if she were nearly asleep, the gold ring on her finger glinting in the faint moonlight. They tried to pull it off, but her swollen hand wouldn't let it go. Growing impatient, one of the robbers took out a small knife. His plan was to cut off the finger to get the ring. He gripped her hand, pressed the blade to her skin, and as the steel broke the surface, something impossible happened. Blood began to flow. In that same instant, Margorie McCall's eyes snapped open. She let out a blood-curdling scream. The two grave robbers froze in sheer terror. They stared paralyzed at the woman they thought was dead, now sitting up in her own coffin. A moment later, they scrambled to their feet, dropped their tools, and fled into the night, never to be seen again. Margorie, dazed and shivering, climbed out of her own grave. She was alive. The shock and pain from the knife had somehow jolted her out of the deep coma that everyone had mistaken for death. Barefoot, wrapped in her burial shroud, and covered in dirt, she began the haunting journey back home. Imagine the scene: a lone figure, appearing like a ghost, walking through the deserted streets of Lurgan. She finally reached her front door and gave a familiar knock. Inside, her husband, Dr. John McCall, was sitting with their children, trying to comfort them in their grief. Hearing the knock, he paused. He turned to his children and said, "If your mother were still alive, I would swear that was her knock." He slowly walked to the door and opened it. Standing before him was Margorie, pale, trembling, still in her burial clothes, with a trickle of blood on her hand. The sight was too much for John. His eyes widened in shock. He let out a gasp and collapsed on the floor, dead from the sheer fright. In a cruel twist of fate, the man who had just buried his wife was now dead himself, and would soon be buried in the very grave she had just escaped. Margorie McCall didn't just survive, she went on to live a full life. She eventually remarried, had more children, and lived for many more years. When she finally did pass away for the second and final time, she was returned to Shankill graveyard. She was laid to rest in the same plot, right beside her first husband, John. Her tombstone was carved with the 6 words that would make her immortal: lived once, buried twice. For over 300 years, her story has been told and retold, a staple of Irish folklore. Is it a legend that grew over time, or is it a documented fact? Some skeptics call it a tall tale, but the parish records and the physical grave itself Suggest something truly extraordinary happened all those years ago. What do you think? Could you imagine waking up in your own coffin? Margorie's story is a chilling reminder that sometimes the most unbelievable tales are the ones that are actually true. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into one of Ireland's most mysterious legends. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next deep dive into the strange and unexplained. Let me know in the comments what other historical mysteries you'd like me to cover. Until next time, stay curious.